A Madcap Ride Across the Veld, from The Boer War by Thomas Packenham. The following was said by General Jan Smuts in 1906, some 4 years after the end of the Anglo-Boer War. The Jameson Raid was the real declaration of war in the great Anglo-Boer conflict. And that is so in spite of the 4 years' truce that followed. The aggressors consolidated their alliance. The defenders, on the other hand, silently and grimly prepared for the inevitable. What no one, least of all Kruger, could have foreseen when the London Convention had been signed in 1884 was that the Rand would be discovered 2 years later. The resulting explosion in wealth of the Transvaal had an explosive political result. Quite suddenly, the Cape and the Transvaal seemed to be exchanging their roles as political leadership of the subcontinent passed to the Transvaal. There was now a double anomaly about the two states. The Cape was a British colony, though the majority of the white inhabitants were Afrikaners. The Transvaal was still a Boer republic, though it appeared that the majority of its inhabitants were, by the mid-1890s, British, for the gold rush had sucked in so many British immigrants. Who then was to control the Transvaal, the richest state in Africa? This was the question which Jameson tried to answer with his madcap ride across the veld. When the raid was imminent, the old president declared, "I shall wait until the tortoise puts out his head. Then I shall cut it off." In the event, he was far too clever to do anything of the sort. He had the tortoise wrapped up, so to speak, and sent to London as a gift for the Queen. It was to London that he sent Dr. Jameson and the raiders to be sentenced by a Crown Court, to the great embarrassment of all concerned, to terms ranging from 15 months in jail or more. Worse, Rhodes was revealed as the arch-plotter and arch-bungler of the whole affair. This was proved by 2 official inquiries and 2 public trials in London and South Africa. It could not be denied, once Kruger had published to the world the amazing collection of code telegrams and other secret documents found on the battlefield of Doornkop. It was at the inquiry held by the Cape government that there emerged the answer to the central puzzle. Why had the Johannesburg Rising, organized by Rhodes, collapsed so ignominiously? As the man who had then been Prime Minister at the Cape, as well as Chairman of the Chartered Company, Rhodes himself was forced to testify, and a wretched figure he cut during the 2 days he was in the witness box. It turned out that he and his multi-millionaire backer, Alfred Byte, had hopelessly overestimated the strength of the opposition to Kruger among the Uitlanders. A large minority were not British at all, but were Afrikaners from the Cape, Germans, Frenchmen, even Americans. Of course, they had their grievances, including their lack of political rights, but they were earning good money in the gold mines and were in no great hurry to overthrow the government. The same applied to many of the independent capitalists who had stakes in the Rand goldfields. And even the Johannesburg reformers, the cardboard revolutionaries, had not been able to agree on the crucial question. Once they had toppled Kruger's Republic of the Transvaal, what would they put in its place? An Uitlander Republic? Or, as Rhodes and Beit wanted, a British colony under the British flag? While the reformers had pleaded for time to patch up their differences, Rhodes and Beit had kept their heads well buried in the sand. In Beit's case, this was almost literally the case. He took a seaside holiday at Muizenberg during the crucial weekend when Jameson was due to set off. Rhodes had remained hovering about Groote Schuur, his palace in the pine woods above Cape Town, postponing the decision to recall Jameson, although the invasion was immediately repudiated by both the British and the Cape governments. William Schreiner, Olive's younger brother, and the Cape's Attorney General gave the Cape Inquiry an account of an interview with Rhodes during that period. Rhodes utterly broken down by the fiasco of the rising. Rhodes blurting out that Jameson had upset his apple cart. Rhodes refusing to stop him with the abject excuse, "Poor Jameson, we've been friends for 20 years. How can I ruin him now?" Yet it also emerged that Rhodes did try to ruin Jameson a few days later. He had sent a message to him in the Pretoria jail, instructing him to take the whole blame. This was the unsavory story of the raid as it emerged from the trials and official inquiries. And absurd as were the illusions of the conspirators, the political effects were real enough, as Milner knew to his cost. The raid had disastrously weakened the imperial position in South Africa. In 1898, Kruger was re-elected as the president of the Transvaal for a fourth term, routing his more progressive Boer opponents. And he was now the hero not only of the Boers in the Transvaal, but also of their fellow Afrikaners at the Cape. The bonds of a new kind of Cape colonial nationalism, which Rhodes had inspired, were now broken, and the Cape Afrikaners were forced back into the lager mentality they had abandoned for a decade. Of course, this would not necessarily have been a bad thing for imperialists if the Cape had not had self-government, but it had, and the Afrikaners remained in the majority. As for Rhodes, he was severely censured both at the Cape Inquiry and at the Parliamentary Inquiry in London. He had been forced to resign both as chairman of the Chartered Company and as Cape Prime Minister. He then announced that he would abandon Cape politics and in future devote himself to the country that bore his name. It was about time. Rhodes's gamble in sending off most of the Rhodesian police with Jameson had helped precipitate native risings by the Matabele and the Mashona, which were only stamped out at heavy financial cost to the Chartered Company. When Milner had been sent to the Cape in 1897, it was his job to restore the world destroyed by Jameson. The first problem was how to deal with the ex-Colossus and his partners, including Alfred Byte. As Governor and High Commissioner, it was Milner's job to be on good terms with all the pro-British party, especially these ex-German naturalized British millionaires, goldbugs like Alfred Byte. And on good terms he was. Yet he could not conceal from his close friends his private feelings. Rhodes and Byte's plan for invading the Transvaal had not only been idiotic, it was unscrupulous. He did not now trust Rhodes and his associates an inch. "They would give me away, or anyone else, for the least of their own ends," he declared in an outburst to Philip Gell. They were money grubbers and potential rebels. Yet he could not help liking Rhodes. It needed a moral and intellectual structure as complex as his own to realize that Rhodes is thoroughly untrustworthy, yet cordially to admire him.